Here is something nobody in the productivity industry wants to admit. Most of the people working the hardest are not performing at their best. They are performing at their most exhausted. They are running on urgency and cortisol and the constant anxiety of never having done enough. They have optimized their schedule down to the minute and still feel like they are falling behind. They have productivity systems stacked on top of productivity systems, and yet the work that actually matters, the deep, clear, focused work, keeps getting pushed to tomorrow. This is not a failure of effort. It is a failure of philosophy. The ancient Stoics understood something that centuries of modern performance culture has still not fully grasped. The path to genuine excellence does not run through maximum output. It runs through maximum clarity, through the disciplined management of your inner world, through the understanding that how you think determines how you perform, and that most people are thinking in ways that make real performance nearly impossible. Marcus Aurelius ruled the most powerful empire on earth and wrote in private about how to keep his mind clear and his judgment sound under conditions of extreme pressure. Seneca managed enormous wealth and political danger and spent his most productive years writing about the relationship between inner discipline and outer effectiveness. Epictetus had nothing, not freedom, not possessions, not status, and built a philosophy of peak performance that is still being taught in elite settings 2,000 years later. They were not theorists, they were practitioners, and what they practiced was not more effort, it was better thinking. Today I am going to share 12 Stoic principles that can transform how you approach your work, your decisions, and your capacity under pressure, not as abstract philosophy, as a practical operating system for a life of sustainable excellence. Principle 1. Direct your energy where it actually works. The first and most foundational principle of Stoic performance is the one Epictetus built his entire philosophy around. Some things are within your control, others are not. The first category includes your effort, your attention, your choices, your response to what happens, your attitude in difficulty. The second category includes everything else: the economy, other people's decisions, outcomes, reputation, recognition, timing. Most people spend the majority of their mental energy in the second category. They worry about results they cannot guarantee. They stew over opinions they cannot change. They rehearse conversations that may never happen, and replay conversations that are over and cannot be undone. That is not caution. That is waste. And it is exhausting in a way that has nothing to do with how hard you are working. When you draw a clear line between what is yours to influence and what is not, and when you ruthlessly redirect your energy toward the first category and release the second, something dramatic happens to your capacity. Not because you are working harder, because you stop working against yourself. Your best work is born from undivided attention, and undivided attention is only possible when you have stopped spending it on what you cannot change. The practice is simple and demanding. Every time you feel anxiety or frustration building, pause and ask one question. Is this within my control? If yes, act with full commitment. If no, release it as consciously as you can. Not as resignation, as an active decision to protect your most valuable resource. Principle 2. Fall in love with the process. Our culture tells us to be outcome obsessed. Fix your eyes on the goal. Visualize the result. Tie your motivation to the destination. But outcomes are never fully within your control. The market shifts. The decision maker changes. The timing is wrong. And if your sense of worth and your sense of direction are anchored in a result you cannot guarantee, you are building your performance on the most unstable foundation available. The Stoics offered a fundamentally different approach. Fall in love with the process. Detach from the result, not because results do not matter, but because your best chance of achieving them is to stop gripping them so tightly. Marcus Aurelius did not obsess over ruling Rome flawlessly. He focused on the quality of his effort and judgment in each decision, one at a time, as it arrived. He understood that if the process was excellent, the outcomes would take care of themselves to the degree any outcome can. When you release your attachment to a specific result, something liberating happens. You stop performing for the approval of an outcome and start working for the quality of the work itself. The anxiety that comes from needing to succeed gets replaced by the engagement that comes from wanting to do this well. That is not a subtle difference. It is the difference between grinding and flowing, between working under pressure and working with presence. The authentic victory is the effort given fully and honestly. That is the only success you can truly own. Principle 3. Build the discipline muscle. Daily self-discipline is not a personality trait you either have or do not have. It is a capacity that is built through repeated use, exactly like a physical muscle. Seneca believed in treating the body and mind rigorously, not as punishment but as preparation. He understood that the man who cannot follow through on small commitments to himself will not follow through on large ones. That the internal experience of saying you will do something and then doing it, especially when you do not feel like it, is what builds the architecture of reliable performance. This is not about single dramatic acts of willpower. It is about the accumulation of small consistent choices. Choosing the harder task over the easier distraction. Following through on the morning practice when the bed is warm and the motivation is absent. Staying with the difficult problem instead of migrating to something that feels more immediately rewarding. Each of those small choices is a signal to your own mind. It says, I am the kind of person who follows through. And over time that signal becomes an identity that does not need motivation to activate because it has been built into the structure of how you operate. Every act of discipline compounds. The man who practices small disciplines consistently becomes, over time, a fundamentally different person than the one who waits for willpower to arrive. Not because of any single decision, because of the cumulative weight of all of them. Principle 4. Use obstacles as training material. Marcus Aurelius wrote one of the most practically useful sentences in the history of philosophy. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way. Most of us are trained to avoid failure, to root around obstacles, to take the path of least resistance and treat any significant difficulty as a sign that something has gone wrong. The Stoics inverted this completely. They understood that difficulty is not what stands between you and growth. It is the mechanism of growth. That every setback, every failure, every moment of adversity is offering you something that easier circumstances never could. The chance to practice a virtue under real pressure. Patience that costs you something. Resilience that is earned rather than assumed. Creativity that only emerges when the obvious path is closed. When you fail, you are not a failure. You are a practitioner who has been given live feedback. The question is not, why is this happening to me? The Stoic question is, what is this demanding of me and do I have it? The answer almost always is yes, but you will not know that until you stop treating the obstacle as an enemy and start treating it as a teacher. Every hard thing you have already been through is evidence. Evidence that you are capable of more than you believed before you were tested. The question is whether you will use that evidence going forward or keep filing it under luck and circumstance. Principle 5. Show up fully in this moment. Seneca wrote, "The greatest obstacle to living is expectancy, which hangs upon tomorrow and loses today." Read that again. How much of your day are you actually in? Physically present in one place while mentally rehearsing a future conversation. Doing one task while replaying a past decision. Sitting with someone you love while somewhere else entirely in your head. That division is not multitasking. It is the systematic destruction of your capacity. Because your best work, your clearest thinking, your deepest connection with the people and problems in front of you, none of that is available in partial attention. All of it requires presence. The Stoics were uncompromising about this. The past is memory. The future is speculation. The present is the only place where your actual power lives, where you can think clearly, where you can act decisively, where you can connect genuinely. Every time you pull your attention back to the task in front of you, you are not just improving that specific moment. You are training a capacity, the capacity to be where you are. And that capacity, developed over time, is one of the rarest and most valuable things a person can bring to any endeavor. Your focus is your power. It can only be deployed in the present. Guard it accordingly. Principle 6. Bring excellence to what is in front of you now. One of the most quietly radical ideas in Stoic philosophy is this: how you do anything is how you do everything. Your character is not revealed in the grand moments of high stakes and high visibility. It is built in the ordinary ones, in the email you write carefully or carelessly, in the conversation you give full attention to or move through distractedly, in the small commitment you honor or quietly let slide because no one will notice. Seneca wrote, "As each day arises, welcome it as the very best day of all and make it your own possession." This is not a call to manufactured enthusiasm, it is a call to intention. To bring your actual self, your actual care, your actual capability to whatever is directly in front of you right now. Not saving your best for some future moment when the stakes feel high enough to deserve it. The habit of excellence is built in small repetitions, not in grand occasions. Every time you bring genuine quality to something that would not have suffered from less, you are training the instinct that will show up without effort when the genuinely important moments arrive. Mastery is not made in the spotlight. It is made in all the moments nobody sees, where you chose to do it right anyway. Principle 7. Build your character on 4 foundations. The Stoics identified 4 virtues as the complete architecture of good character, not as moral ideals to aspire to abstractly, as practical tools for navigating difficulty well. Courage is the willingness to do what is right even when it is frightening or costly. Not the absence of fear, the decision to act rightly in its presence. Every time you have a hard conversation instead of avoiding it. Every time you commit to something difficult instead of choosing the comfortable option. That is courage in practice. Wisdom is the ability to see situations clearly and respond to them effectively. Not intelligence alone, but the integration of experience, reflection, and honest self-assessment into sound judgment. Wisdom is what stops you from winning an argument you should have lost, or pursuing a path that looks right from the outside and feels wrong from the inside. Temperance is the practice of moderation, the discipline of not letting any single drive, appetite, or ambition override your judgment and your values. Excess in any direction, whether in work, in consumption, in ambition, or in reaction, tends to produce outcomes that undermine what you actually want. Justice is how you treat the people around you, not as a transaction, as a reflection of your character. The Stoics understood that your effectiveness in the world is inseparable from your integrity toward the people in it. Before any significant decision, ask yourself which of these 4 virtues is most relevant and what it demands of you. That question alone will improve the quality of your choices considerably. Principle 8. Reflect daily and be honest about what you see. Every evening, Seneca reviewed his day with a specific set of questions. What did I do well today? Where did I fall short of what I value? What would I do differently if I could? This was not self-criticism. It was calibration, the practice of closing the loop on each day so that the lessons it contained were actually extracted rather than just experienced and forgotten. Paired with that reflection is the practice of genuine gratitude. Not the gratitude of forced positivity, but the honest recognition of what is actually good in your life right now. Marcus Aurelius began many mornings by reminding himself of the specific things he was fortunate to have access to, not to generate feeling, to anchor his attention in reality rather than in the gap between where he was and where he thought he should be. These 2 practices, honest reflection and honest gratitude, create a feedback loop that most people never access. Honest reflection tells you what to adjust. Honest gratitude reminds you what you are building on. Together, they produce the kind of self-awareness that separates people who keep making the same mistakes from people who visibly learn and improve over time. 5 minutes at the end of each day, honestly spent, will compound into a dramatically different level of self-knowledge within a year. Principle 9. Own everything in your sphere. The moment you blame something outside yourself for your situation, you hand your power to that thing, not metaphorically, practically. If the reason you are where you are is the economy, or your upbringing, or your boss, or your circumstances, then the solution also lives with those things. And those things are outside your control, which means you are stuck. The Stoic approach is different. You did not choose everything that happened to you, but you own your response to all of it. You own the interpretation you place on events. You own the next decision. You own the effort you bring to whatever situation you are in, regardless of how you got there. This is not about being harsh with yourself. It is about reclaiming agency. Because the person who takes full responsibility for their response, even when the circumstances were genuinely unfair, is the person who can actually do something about their situation. They always have a move, even if the move is simply to change their interpretation. A victim cannot perform at their best because they are waiting for circumstances to change. A person who owns their response can perform at their best in almost any circumstance because they have stopped waiting. That distinction is not a small one, it is the foundation of everything. Principle 10. Protect your time by choosing what is essential. Marcus Aurelius returned repeatedly to one question when something was demanding his attention. Is this necessary? Not, is this interesting? Not, is this urgent? Not, is this what other people expect of me? Is this necessary? Is this the thing that actually matters right now? That question, asked honestly, eliminates an enormous amount of what fills most people's days. The meetings that could have been an email, the obligations accepted out of guilt rather than alignment, the distractions that masquerade as productivity, the tasks that feel important because they are loud rather than because they are genuinely significant. The Stoics understood that peak performance is not about doing everything with maximum effort. It is about being ruthless enough to identify the one thing that most deserves your attention right now and giving it your undivided focus before you touch anything else. Consistency applied to the essential beats scattered intensity applied to everything. Small focused steps taken with clear intention every day build momentum that dramatic but directionless effort cannot replicate. You do not need to work longer. You need to protect the hours when you are doing the work that actually matters. Principle 11. Win the morning before the world gets in. The first hour of your day does not just set the tone, it sets the identity. Before the phone fills with other people's urgency, before the demands of the day arrive and begin competing for your attention, there is a window, and what you do inside that window is a declaration about who you are and what you are building. The Stoics rose early, not as a performance of discipline, as a statement of priority. They used that window for reflection, for reading, for preparing the mind before difficulty arrived. They understood that the person who begins the day reactively, immediately responding to what others send their way, is already behind, already operating in someone else's agenda rather than their own. Throughout the day, the same principle applies to every choice. The Stoics did not believe in waiting until the virtuous path felt natural. They believed in choosing it deliberately, especially when it did not feel natural, because that deliberate choice, made repeatedly over time, is what transforms a decision into an instinct. Own your morning, then own your choices. Not all of them will be right, but all of them will be yours. Principle 12. Measure your progress by who you are becoming. The last principle is also the most liberating one. Stop measuring your success by what you have accumulated and start measuring it by who you are becoming. The world offers an external scorecard: money, status, recognition, followers, the number in your account and the title after your name. And none of those things are irrelevant, but none of them are stable either. They go up and they go down with forces you cannot fully control. And if your sense of your own progress is tied to them, your sense of your own worth fluctuates with them. The Stoics kept an internal scorecard. Did I act with courage today? Did I stay composed when composure was hard? Did I extract the lesson from what went wrong? Did I give my actual best effort to what was actually in front of me? When your primary metric is the quality of your character rather than the quantity of your results, every situation becomes an opportunity. A win is a chance to demonstrate integrity at the top. A loss is a chance to demonstrate resilience at the bottom, and both are advancing the only progress that cannot be taken from you. That scorecard belongs entirely to you. It does not depend on the market, the competition, the economy, or anyone's opinion. It depends on your choices, and your choices, as Epictetus reminded us, are always yours. That is where your power lives. That is where it has always lived. Closing 12 Principles, 2,000 years old. As practical today as the morning Marcus Aurelius wrote them for himself in private, with no intention of being read. The man who focuses only on what he controls, who falls in love with the process rather than gripping the outcome, who builds discipline through small daily commitments, who uses obstacles as training material, who shows up fully in this moment, who brings genuine quality to ordinary tasks, who acts from the four virtues, who reflects honestly each evening, who takes full ownership of his response, who protects his time by choosing what is essential, who wins the morning before the world arrives, and who measures his growth by who he is becoming rather than what he has accumulated. That man does not grind himself into exhaustion pursuing excellence. He embodies it, quietly, consistently, without needing an audience. You do not need to implement all 12 at once. Choose one, the one that names something you already know you need. Apply it with intention for 1 week. Notice what shifts, and then add the next. The Stoics did not transform overnight. They practiced every day, without expecting perfection, without requiring dramatic results. Just returning to the work one more time with a little more understanding than the time before. That is how excellence is actually built, not in a moment of inspiration. In the accumulation of ordinary days, lived with extraordinary intention. If this video reached something real in you, leave a comment below. Write the one principle you are starting with, just one. Name it and commit to it publicly, because naming it makes it real. Subscribe to Stoic Journal and turn on the bell. Every week, content like this for people who are serious about building something that lasts. Until next time, focus on what is yours. Give everything to the process.